Thank you for listening to our final report on different textiles and the impact on the environment. Our primary focus is to look at the differences in greenhouse gas emissions, pollution outputs, and resource consumption across major textile types in the clothing industry and see which environmental factors most strongly influence the overall environment. For some background, the textile industry is one of the biggest industries, having nearly 30 million workers in 2023. Because of how huge it has a significant impact on the environment. This comes from resources like polyester and synthesized materials having the most impact on it. An article we found states that polyester has the highest impact on climate change, and out of cotton, loop, flax, and silk, which are all natural fibers, it's considered the most unsustainable material there is there. Nylon is another synthetic or plastic-based item, and is super impactful on its waste, producing 16 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram made, which is a rate much higher than cotton or polyester. This isn't to say that natural materials don't contribute to environmental degradation at all either. Cotton has a water scarcity index of 124 compared to polyester's 2.9, which means it consumes and takes up a lot more water than polyester. But overall, the impact on synthetic textiles seem to be much bigger than natural fibers. In this case, in this context, synthetic textiles and plastic-based textiles are interchangeable. We predict that plastic-based textiles and mixed-based textiles have a higher impact on the environment based off certain metrics such as greenhouse gas emission and water consumption and more. This shows that we also predict that there'll be a lower correlation between environmental degradation and natural materials. For data, we use a data set we found in Kaggle, which includes important variables such as greenhouse gas emissions, pollutions emitted, water consumption, energy consumption, waste generation, and a final sixth variable we made by ourselves called environmental score. This variable is a measure of all of the previous five and is the main proxy for which we will indicate if a product type or product has a big impact or a low impact on the environment. When you look at all the variables and look at all the product types, we see that it is very equal, which is very interesting because, as our hypothesis stated, that we expected natural, non-plastic materials to be lower than the other two types. But almost in every single category, all three of them have equal statistics. Looking at this data, it's just that when you go deeper into the analysis and look more in depth into the specific products of the product types, there's more variance. And what we expected was that some mixed material has the highest environmental score, while non-plastic and natural materials have the lowest environmental score. But it's also interesting to note how wool and cotton are higher than nylon, which was something that we would not expect. We also use an LOS regression model to see whether our product type can predict the environmental score and see how correlated it is. But with the very minimal R-squared of 0.001, it's not a very good predictor. The MNLLG regression does something similar but flips it around, and similarly has a very small R-squared score as well. We have some ethical concerns around synthetic generation of data, as it's fake and it needs to be stated here to prevent any risks of false information spreading in the world. But to account for that, we've been transparent with our data, and we have documented the process in our coding. Unless you're professional, do not use any real world conclusions for this. And some things I learned from this experiment was that our hypothesis is wrong, that the material type is not a good predictor for environmental score unless you go specific on the products and the materials that is used. This is very contradictory to what most literature states around synthetic textiles, and our data which makes sense as our data is synthetically generated. If we want to go further in it, we need a real data set with more impactful variables and a more defined way to analyze the data. We also need to look at external factors besides material type to draw any conclusions of environmental damage. Thank you for listening.